Well, welcome. If you are joining us from LinkedIn or YouTube for the informational webinar from Rick Prozac, my good friend and colleague, about his new cohort starting up April 1st for uh, training chiefs of staff and number twos to be the number one, operate like a boss. That seminar is coming up here shortly. Rick, welcome here today.
Jason, good to see you, my friend. I'm so excited about this webinar today and the program. Let's get right into it.
So you have, I think, 20, about 25 minutes with us today. If you're signing in from LinkedIn or for YouTube, go ahead. If you've got questions, put them in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to dig in. Now, Rick, you have been a consultant. You have been a CEO. You have been a fractional executive. You've worked with the big consulting firms, and now you have this training program. Kick us off. Why did you launch this training program? And give us maybe a 360-degree view of who is this training program for?
Yeah, I'd love to, Jason. So cutting straight to it, it's for the number two type people, which I believe are underserved and kind of overlooked, right? So the number two could be a chief of staff, could be a COO, could be a GM within an overall division, right? Anyone reporting to a founder or CEO. And you're right. I've done a lot of things in my career, Jason. 4 times I've been kind of the number one guy, and 19 times I've been the number two. And I realized long ago, I think in my very first chief of staff role, what the value was that I had the benefit and blessing of a formal education by the way of an MBA. And every single day, every minute of every day in that role, I used every ounce of that degree. In working with counterparts across the large company I was with, those who didn't have that, it was really obvious that there was some gap. And so those planted the seeds. That's going back now 16, 17 years of, wow, like there needs to be something more formal for the number two person that doesn't cost a fortune, doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and it can be done in a rapid period of time. So generally speaking, that you're exactly right. It's for the number two people, and that's what it's for.
Well, as we were talking about this program and putting this together, we were talking about how that number two position is such a leveraged position within an organization because they are a conduit, a transmission perhaps between the directional leader and the folks that have to go implement this. And often they are, like you talked about, overlooked in the training. And what are the things that you think that that are valuable that you need to pull out and put into this training program specifically for these number two folks?
Well, sure. And just to comment a little bit more on that, add to that, right? The number one person, stereotypically, but I've seen it in practice, has no shortage of ideas, right? Some of those ideas are really good and some of them are real stinkers. But what do? Right? They spin up a lot of these crazy ideas and then they try to hand it off to someone to get it done. They don't care how it's done, but they want it done and they want it done yesterday. And so that number two person has to live and thrive in the chaos. But I find that they don't really have a structure or a system to deal with it. So the key principles that are going to be offered in this 8-week long training course are really covering the 6 pillars of what I call an operating model that the number two can wrap their arms around and anchor all of their work in. And as these ideas come in from left field and right field and up and down and below from the number one person, fast and furious, they know how to bucket it in and then use that as a tool to have a good conversation with them about, hey, does this make sense? Should we be doing this now? Is this the right investment? What else are we forgetting about, etc.? So kind of giving you a sneak preview of what we're going to talk about, but that's really how it's organized.
One of the things that stood out to me as we were talking about this, it reminds me of systems thinking. And I'm going to throw up on the screen some of the things you're talking about here. You've got this idea of an operating model being simple.
Yes.
And also the idea that organizations do 3 things and 3 ways of doing those things. And that operating model is the functions and the methods. And it was so fascinating to me because, you know, I've owned a handful of businesses and had some exits and dealt with big organizations, small organizations. And you're so right that what in your many years of doing this, I mean, you 19 times the number two person, you've really distilled this down into a very simple operating model, which I think is sort of closely held secret that you don't need this years and years of extensive training necessarily. You maybe just need some fundamental ways of thinking about the business and breaking it down to be able to achieve outsized results.
That's absolutely true. And, you know, maybe it makes sense for me to talk about how I came up with this model for a minute. So there are two halves of it. There are the things that I believe every organization does. Now, this is Fortune 10 companies that are publicly traded to, you know, 1 and 2 person firms and small entrepreneurial concerns, profits, nonprofits, etc. They all do these three things, and I'll get into that in a minute. But how did I come up with this? Like sales, delivery, and operations, and we'll talk about that. I was, going back a few years, like 2018, 19. I was part of a very well-known and respected management consulting company, and part of the leadership team for a practice that was broken into 3 groups. And our boss, who's an amazing, like #1 guy, right, and really had everything figured out on the spreadsheets and whatnot, had this operating model for our group that consisted of 14 specific things. And for this consulting company, it was everything from proposal development to knowledge management to care and feeding the employees, utilization tracking and metrics, and all these things. And it was complicated. We only had 85 or 90 people in the group at the time, and there were 3 teams within the group and 14 dimensions to this operating model. So you multiply it out, and he wanted people to represent and leaders of each of those components. That's 3 times 14, 42 very unique disciplines that he wanted to have leaders for. And we struggled with it. And I remember one fine day I was there with my peers and him in a whiteboard. It was a late Friday afternoon, right? This was standing in our way of like whatever happy hour was about to ensue. And it just came to me, this is overly complicated. And I drew on the whiteboard this Venn diagram that you showed on screen, and I wrote sales, delivery, and operations. And I showed how each of these 14 items could fit in here. And I saw the look on my colleague's face of, aha, that's right. And guess what else, right? The 3 of us were very versed in those 3 disciplines. But one gentleman really gravitated towards delivery. This other gal gravitated towards sales, and I was kind of the operations guy. So now we had leaders, right, first amongst equals of those 3 disciplines, and we had now our ability to go out and find just a handful of other leaders to help with those. And it was a crystallizing moment. And then in another consulting company in 2022, working on with a colleague, figuring out how we could scale from small accounts to more enterprise accounts, and what tools were at our disposal. I mentioned the typical, well, people, process, and technology as a way of bucketing things. And my colleague Joe said, oh, you mean the 3 T's? I'm like, what's that, right? He said, oh, well, it's talent, techniques, and tools. And then he went on to explain that. So within the last several years, I saw the one side of it were the 3 functions of each company, and then the 3 methods. So you have sales, delivery, and operations. And then you have these methods of talent, techniques, and tools that just work hand in glove. And if you intersect those, this is the operating model for any organization on the planet. That's my argument. And that's what we really get into in depth in the course itself. Does that make sense, Jason?
It really does. And again, I appreciate how simple that you've broken this down, because people I think especially when they get outside of a particular area of expertise, tend to sort of fumble around. And you've provided a framework that even if you don't understand the detail of a person's job, you can at least understand how to break it down. And then you can help that person who might be in the day to day, help them break down how they do their work as well. Which, when you're talking about educating these folks who are in those number two positions, the chiefs of staff, the executive assistants, the leaders, the kind of that transmission between the executive leadership and the people who get the day to day work done. If you can inform those folks of how to simplify the map, I guess, of business,
Yes.
then I think that you can equip them with additional tools. Once you've simplified it, you equip them with tools then to think about things differently. Is that what you're going to be breaking down in this course?
That's exactly it. I think there are 15 specific leading practices. I won't be so bold to call them best practices, because who could say what is the best in the world? But I call these leading practices that fit into these 6 different components, the 3 functions and the 3 methods. And it all starts with the most important one, which is sales. And sales is number one for a couple reasons, right? The sales function has to generate enough revenue for your organization, not just to cover its own compensation, but it's a leverage play that has to care and feed for the entire organization. And I remember several years ago when I was moving from a chief of staff role into a head of product operations group for a business unit in this very large tech firm in Silicon Valley. We were a newly formed division. They brought in a heavy hitter from the outside who ran, multi-billion-dollar businesses before, and he was given carte blanche to do things. In his very first town hall meeting, I won't quit my day job here. I'm gonna do a little bit of an accent or impression. German, a gentleman with pretty thick accent. After the pleasantries and introductions, he said, "Let me ask you something. What business are we in?" Room full of engineers. People have these very nerdy, geeky answers. One person explains something. I see. Good. Anyone else? Someone said something. Kind of the one-upsmanship that goes on with engineers. They want to be better. And then the third person stumbled, and he's like, "No, I did not ask you what we sell. I asked you what business are we in? Like any business in the world, we are in the money-making business." And, I was like, yeah, of course. It doesn't matter what you do, right? You have to make money. And it doesn't apply to just businesses. It can be nonprofits. It can be academics trying to get grant money. It can be charitable organizations trying to do fundraising. You need money to make money. You got to go get that money, and that's sales. And the sales function makes a promise to your most valued customers or clients that you have a unique way and the only way to solve that particular client or customer's problem. Otherwise, why would they hand over their money to you? So we start with sales, Jason, and then we kind of build on all of the others. Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, I think people overcomplicate some matters in business, and they think, "Oh, it's so hard to start a business," and I'm like, well, no, it's not. You need somebody who wants to buy something from you, and then you need to be able to fulfill that to them. And you've broken it down so simply. So you start with sales,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get into what's next. What I'm going to pull this up on the screen here, actually,
Yeah,
because
that's
I
great.
love how you break this down. This operations model, 3 functions, 3 methods. We have sales,
Yes.
delivery, operations, and then we've got talent, tools, techniques. How do
Yes.
these operate together?
Sure. So sales makes a promise, and then you have to uphold that promise. So who are the people that have to basically write the check that sales is cashing? Those are the delivery people. And you can deliver offerings to your customers or clients. It can be purely product, purely services, some blend. Typically, that's really what it boils down to. But you have to solve that problem. So without sales, you don't have enough money to do anything. You don't even have an organization. Once you make those promises to your customers or clients, some team has to now fulfill that promise. That's what I call the delivery function. And then last but not least, although they're often the unsung heroes of most organizations, are the operations teams. Typical functions of HR, finance, legal, and compliance, IT, etc. But and typically viewed as cost centers, typically the first group that gets looked at when times are tough. But without those, they're the connective tissue for the organization. They have to be there. And so they do work in this mutually reinforcing manner. And then going over to the other side of the three methods, it's talent, techniques, and tools. Talent are really your people. And I argue that in any organization, if you're in a knowledge worker dominated industry, clearly talent is the most valuable asset you have. But I think in any organization, even one that is very well automated and routinized and commoditized, talent comes first. Why? Because a very good process or set of techniques, and even a very good technical underpinnings and IP and things that are constitute the tools, they can't make up for a bad team. And you can't have a technique go invent a better piece of talent, but you can have talented individuals build better processes and also build better tools. So the order is very important. So a corollary of all this is that the order of the functions and the orders of methods provide a roadmap for, when I'm working with my clients, assessing where they are today and building a roadmap for the future. And you're going to learn all that in this course.
Well, and like you talked about, there are priorities to assessing maybe the breakdown of an organization, what the opportunities of the organization are. And I love how you talk about being the talent first, because they are the backbone of how everything gets dreamt about or implemented within the organization. And then you can apply that to any the sales, the sales part of the organization, the delivery part of the organization, the administrative part of the organization. I love how simply this is broken down. Take us through this. This is something that you've developed as well here. The 9 strategic concerns within the organization. What is this referring to, and how are we going to teach that in this course?
Sure, I'm happy to walk through it. So we have a grid here, and if you look at the Y or vertical axis, it's something I call market value. And then on the X or horizontal axis, it's what I'll call strategic importance or leverage. And so what do I mean by those? So in the market value, you have sales again on top, then delivery, and then the operations function third. And that's typically because that's the order in which these teams are most compensated. Typically, the sales individuals not only, again, provide the leverage and the funding for the entire entity, the entire organization, but typically they're the highest compensated as a result. And then the delivery folks, which deal with R&D, product development, customer support and service, etc., professional services if you have or need them, they touch the customer, but after the sale is made typically, and then they're also vitally important. And last but not least are the operations teams. And it's somewhat easier to order these in those in that relative order of market value or impact. And then on the horizontal axis, the highest strategic importance or leverage, again, I think, are the people and the talent who then build the techniques and then also select, build, and implement the tooling that undergirths that. So if you now take this in unison, and I mentioned it before, you start with the sales talent. When I go into a client organization, if they hire me for a very specific need or pain point, I go solve that problem if I can. And then I use that to earn the right to go talk about other problems. But in the lack of another framework, or once I do have the right to go and look at things more holistically, I use the sequence. So I start with the sales talent, and in discussions with them, I figure out, well, how do you actually do your sales? That gets into the techniques, then the tools. Then I go to the delivery team, talent, techniques, tools, and finally operations team, i.e. talent, techniques, tools. So that 9-step progression provides a roadmap for assessing where you are today and then where you're going to be in the future. It's
It
pretty
feels
simple.
like it feels like you're giving away some sort of secret sauce for consulting. You know, you you know, we're walking into the inner sanctum, and you're giving us the keys to the kingdom, because you're breaking this down in such a, I think, an easy way, a structured way. And you also wrote a book that goes along with this course.
Yes.
Give us a little bit of an overview of what that book's going to cover.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll say this too. This whole concept really didn't come to life until last April. I worked with a marketing person who launched a very successful campaign for my business. And through networking through him, he introduced me to an online global MBA program. And lo and behold, the person running that program liked me and liked what I had to say and said, "We want you to be a professor for our program." And I said, "Great, honored." Then, of course, I had that oh crap moment, Jason, like, well, what the heck am I actually going to talk about? And I think that, marinating in this and ruminating crystallized these concepts. So building a 1 hour long lecture for this very, broad reaching global online MBA program, reaching 79 countries and hundreds of students, forced me to crystallize things down into condensed format. So the textbook that I've just recently written is now extrapolating and expanding those things that were crammed into an hour and building it out into an 8-week curriculum. So we're just going to go through all of these things in much more detail. We're going to start with sales, and we're going to go to delivery and then operations. We're going to take a little bit of a mid-semester break. We're going to have office hours and one-on-one consultations with each of the students. And then we're going to finish with the 3 methods of talent, techniques, and tools, kind of wrapped with a kickoff and a closeout meeting, etc., or course. And during that period of time, there are going to be 15 and more really good and leading practices that come into those different categories. And the textbook and the course is just part of it. Anyone that has gone through, say, a formal MBA program knows that the value of that education is not just what you learn, it's the network you build. So these cohorts, which would like to be, roughly 10 students plus or minus, you're going to form a bond going through this course together. You're going to make connections outside of the program that may last a lifetime. You're going to find those to be very valuable as well. So you get the course, you get the textbook, and we're going to be kind of crowdsourcing other best practices as we go, and the peer networking out of it. It's just a great deal.
I think so too. And I'm going to pull this up on the screen. It might be a little bit hard to read, but as we were going through this course, laying out the value that a person is going to receive here, this is just a handful of the chapters that you've outlined in the course. In a course that is priced at around $5,000 versus an MBA, which I think when we look at that is, 50, 60,000 and more. This is 90% less expensive than an MBA, and yet you're going to get into the how to build an ideal customer or client profile. So, thinking about the cost of targeting wrong customers, if you target your customers a little bit better by going through this course, can you recruit five grand? Targeting a customer too early or too late, we'll get into that. Or building systems for follow-up, looking at inefficiencies or manual processes, and how can you automate those? Could $1 million organization eke out the value of $5,000? I think, of course, they could. And then you get into delivery functions, operations, talents. You've got unique value proposition, objectives, and key results. What do you say to a person who is looking for a framework to install into their business? Is this a framework that they might be able to to implement quickly into the organization?
100%. I mean, and the course is built such that we're going to be spoon feeding each of these concepts in a week by week program. The goal and the homework is you have to now do some things offline to apply these tools and frameworks to your own organization, and then come back. And each lecture will be kind of a bit of a recap of the prior concept, and then focusing on the next concept. And as I mentioned, there are office hours and one-on-one consultations sprinkled throughout, so that we're really building this in a curated way for you. And if you can bring that just back on screen one more hot second here, Jason, just think of this. And you mentioned it. The average cost of an accredited MBA program is anywhere from $60,000 to $120,000 and takes 2 years. This is a 2-month program versus 2 years, and it's less than $5,000. So, and I argue that for a number 2 person, right? This isn't by the way, this is not going to replace the benefit of you going, if you're fortunate enough and you have the funds, or your employer sponsors you to go back to school and get an MBA or go full time. I found mine incredibly valuable, and I'm blessed that I was able to do that early enough in my career that it has had a long lasting effect. I'm not saying this is a wholesale replacement, but I'm going to give you about 80% of what you need as a number 2 to be dangerous. By dangerous, I mean, looking at all the ROI here, you're going to recoup these things very quickly. You mentioned one, which is the cost of targeting the wrong customers or getting there too early or too late. But look at the people. When we get into the talent module, which is the top method, there are experts that say that the cost of bringing the wrong employee in, meaning you have to fire someone, is typically more than 30% of their first year earnings. If you take an employee that is being paid $50,000 a year and they're the wrong person, it's going to cost you more than $15,000. That's more than 3x the cost of this course. So if you can just, focusing on that one particular area, do a better job, or help instruct your organization do a better job there, the ROI is triple. Jason, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, one of the things that stands out for me on this list is that you get into objectives and key results, and I find that so many small businesses don't even know what their objectives or key results should be, and then they wonder why they're getting nowhere. Which seems that if you're in an organization, if you're chief of staff or number 2, and you're in an organization that doesn't have a clear understanding of what its objectives and key results are for the different functions in the organization, the value of simply setting those and working through it here with Rick, who's going to be the instructor, I think. I mean, I remember an organization I did some consulting with a number of years ago. Their business was up 40% in 1 year, simply because we broke down, hey, here's the priorities for your organization, and here's the kind of the umbrella priorities why you're doing this anyhow. I feel like you must have some really meaty stories that you're going to be pulling out that can, I think, move that organization forward quickly, even with just that 1 week.
One of the things you're going to get from me in this course is the instructor, as the 35 years experience I have, having worked in and led all of these functions and having moved these levers, right? These methods of talent techniques and tools in order to accomplish things. And you mentioned the OKR, or objective and key results. There's so many different frameworks for goal setting and aligning through organizations. OKRs is one of them. It was invented by Andy Grove, famously founder of Intel Corporation. It kind of was forgotten about for a while, popular but not really in the vogue. But it came back with a vengeance a few years ago, and a lot of companies jumped on that bandwagon. But there's so many other frameworks. You're going to get stories from me. You're going to get real world application, but you're going to get kind of the things that work, right? It's just really practical.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to put that screen back up here just to, again, as we close this out, If you'd like some more information about this course, you can head to COO On Demand. I'm going to go ahead and put that up here on the screen as well. It's been up in the left-hand side as the QR code, COOondemand.co. You can also, in the back channels, send us a direct message or send an email to Rick. Again, you can go to COOondemand.co to find him. Rick, any closing words that you want to give our audience as we wind this down?
I hope this has been valuable. If you decide to enroll in the course, you're going to get a whole hell of a lot covered in a short period of time, which I think you'll find very valuable. If you don't, I hope you found something valuable from here that you can take back to the ranch and apply immediately. And there are other ways to engage with me. Going through an 8-week course would be great, and we hope you all attend. If you're not able to do that, but you need some coaching, you can reach out to me, and I do executive coaching. I also do, my bread and butter is being a fractional number 2, right? So if you think that your organization needs someone like me, be happy to have that conversation. But regardless, I hope everyone has a really good rest and blessed rest of the week. So thank you, Jason, and thank you everyone for attending.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick, my friend and colleague. And again, on the live stream, if you would like more information, go ahead and give us a DM. You can also go to COOondemand.co. And this cohort starts April 1st. So now's your moment to contact us. Have a great day.
No fooling.